All right, so we're in a new sort of time here where we're trying this online learning. I appreciate you guys doing some self-learning at home. I really want us to stay on track. We've worked really, really hard, and depending on how long we're out, I don't want us to be at a disadvantage getting ready for the AP exam. So I'm trying to make it very manageable. This will be lesson 1. I will post each lesson separately with a little exit ticket that you will get extra credit if you complete, and hopefully that will keep us on track for whenever we get back. If you are out because you traveled to some fun place over spring break, this hopefully will also just help you because you might have to stay out longer than the rest of us who stayed home. So we will start social psychology, unit 9, last unit. Social psychology as a subject that is being studied started after World War II. A lot of researchers who were affected in some way personally by the Holocaust really wanted to delve into how could people do this to other people. A lot of people wanted to see why Nazi soldiers would obey authority and do some of the horrible things they did to the Jewish people. So that's sort of where this comes from. Social psychology is the scientific study of how we think about, influence, and relate to one another. Okay, so how people relate to one another, influence one another, is what we're going to be talking about. It focuses on the situation, how we relate to one another, and answers questions as to why a person might act one way in one situation and totally different in another situation, but they are still the same person. So we will start with attribution theory. I'd go ahead and put a star by attribution theory. They like to ask questions just in general. Attribution theory explains someone's behavior either by crediting the situation they're in or the person's disposition, which is who they are, their personality. It tries to explain how people determine the cause of what they observe. So when you are out people watching, or when you're in class and you see someone doing something over on the other side of the room, or you're like, why is Mrs. Duncan making us do online learning during our extra week of spring break? Okay, you're not just going to observe the behavior and stop. You're going to kind of in your head think, why? And that is what attribution does, is we as people like to assign a reason to why people are doing the things they do. And we have 2 ways we can do that. We can either say, 1, it's because of who they are, or 2, it is because of the situation they are in. If you would like, what I would like you to do at this point is if you go on the website, there is a little, it's called attribution scale, I think, worksheet. On side 1, okay, I want you to answer for you. Okay, so do you describe yourself as what's in the first column or what's in the second column, or does it depend on the situation? After you do that, you can do side 2 or think about side 2. And I want you to think about me. Do you think I am a word in column 1, a word in column 2, or depend on the situation? What you will find is you probably, for yourself and who you are, most likely said depends on the situation. But for me, okay, you would probably choose one column or the other, okay? When we are trying to explain behavior, right, we have 2 choices: who the person is or the situation. Who the person is, that's called internal or dispositional attribution. So we're going to explain behavior by attributing the behavior to the person's personality, who they are. We have a tendency, okay, to use internal attribution, saying that is who the person is, when we're describing other people's behavior. So that's why you probably chose a column for me instead of the depends on the situation. External or situational attribution is when we attribute the behavior because of a situation we're in. Okay, so we're explaining that person's behavior because of the situation, of the circumstances. And we as people have a tendency, when describing what's happening, our own behavior, to attribute it to a situation. All right, the fundamental attribution error is the tendency for us as people, when we are analyzing other people's behavior, to underestimate the impact of the situation and to overestimate disposition. So the fundamental attribution error is illustrated by this little example. Okay, when we are thinking about our own behavior, we think it is dependent upon the situation, but when we look to other people, we think that's who they are. So for example, we have a person who we're watching and they trip on a rock. Okay, the fundamental attribution error says we as people will tend to think that person is a clumsy person. So we have seen a behavior, him tripping, and we will say, oh, that is because he's a clumsy person. We have done an internal attribution, right? It's their personality, that's who they are, they're clumsy, they tripped. If we tripped on a rock, we would say, oh, I was distracted, I was texting, or whatever. Okay, we blame it on the situation. And so that error is that we tend to view our behavior as situational, and we tend to view other people's behavior as that is who they are. All right, now, individualistic cultures and collectivist cultures kind of play differently into this fundamental attribution error. So if you remember, we've talked about these cultures before. We, in America, we live in an individualistic culture. That is, it's all about us, it's personal, that sort of thing. People in individualistic cultures, we tend to fall for the fundamental attribution error more than a person from a collectivist culture. Collectivist culture, they fall for this attribution error a little bit less. They commit this error less often. All right, again, attribution theory, all it's saying is we like to explain people's behavior. We're either going to say it's because of who they are, internal or dispositional attribution, or it's going to be because of their situation. That's external attribution. And the fundamental attribution error says we tend to attribute it more to who the person is, that internal attribution, and we don't really think about it situationally. One more example, say you're at a party and you're socializing and you see a cute guy in the corner and you start to talk to him and he turns around and ignores you. Okay, so fundamental attribution error kicks in. We would say, oh, he doesn't like me, he thinks I'm awful, he's rude, whatever. We don't go the external route and say, oh, well, maybe he just had a bad day or he didn't hear me or something like that. All right, let's see. Self-serving bias, highlight it. They like it. We've talked about it before. This is a review, right? We like to take credit for things that are good. We like to not take credit for things that go wrong. Okay, so how does that play in with attribution? Sort of like this internal-external attribution, right? When we do something good as a person, we like to say, well, that is because we're good, or we pass that test because we're smart. When things go awry, when things go bad, and you don't do well on the test, we'd have a tendency to externally attribute, right? So we say, oh, that was because the teacher stunk, or we failed the test because we were out for 2 weeks because of the coronavirus. Making excuses. Okay. False consensus effect. That is our tendency to overestimate the number of people who agree with us. I could get really political and say that's happening right now, but we have talked about birds of a feather flock together. When you are surrounded by people who are your friends and like-minded, you have a tendency to think everybody also is like that, but it might just be your little group of friends. Confirmation bias, that's another review. We've talked about this. That is an active bias. We go out seeking information that is going to confirm what we already believe. And that can back up these attributions that we have of people. Okay, if we feel like our friend is lazy and not studying or not doing the work, then we see that in other instances. We go out and look for that in other areas of their life. All right, just world hypothesis, highlight that one too, or star that one. They like the just world hypothesis. I have a little activity I'm going to read to you. All right, I'm going to read you a little story, and I want you to listen. And at the end, we are going to, or you are going to, in your own little home or on your phone, you are going to see who you blame. Okay. Once upon a time, a husband and a wife lived together in a part of the city separated by a river from the places of employment, shopping, and entertainment. The husband had to work nights. Each evening, he left his wife and took the ferry boat to work, returning in the morning. The wife soon tired of this arrangement. Restless and lonely, she would take the next ferry into town each evening and develop relationships with a series of lovers. Anxious to preserve her marriage, she always returned home before her husband. In fact, her relationships were always limited. When they threatened to become too intense, she would precipitate a quarrel with her current lover and begin a new relationship. One night, she caused a quarrel with a man. We will call him Man 1. He slammed the door in her face, and she started back to the ferry. Suddenly, she realized that she had forgotten to bring the money for her return fare. She swallowed her pride and returned to Man 1's apartment to borrow the fare. After all, she did not have time to get home. But Man 1 was vindictive and angry because of the quarrel. He slammed the door on his former lover, leaving her with no money. She remembered that a previous lover, whom we shall call Man 2, lived just a few doors away. Surely he would give her the ferry boat fare. However, Man 2 was still so hurt from their old quarrel that he too refused her the money. Now the hour was late, and the woman was getting desperate. She rushed down to the ferry boat and pleaded with the ferry boat captain. He knew her as a regular customer. She asked if he could let her ride free and if she could pay the next night, but the captain insisted that rules were rules and that he could not let her ride without paying the fare. Dawn would soon be breaking, and her husband would be returning from work. The woman remembered that there was a free bridge about a mile further on, but the road to the bridge was a dangerous one, known to be frequented by dangerous individuals. Nevertheless, she had to get home, so she took the road. On the way, a man stepped out of the bushes and demanded her money. She told him she had none. He seized her. In the ensuing tussle, the man stabbed the woman, and she died. Thus ends our story. There have been 5 characters: wife, Man 1, Man 2, ferry boat captain, and robber. So, what do you think? I want you to rank them in order of blame. What do you think?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Man 1 and 2
are to blame?
Yeah, because they want to give her the money, and thus, actually no, she's to blame for all of this.
She's to blame. Dawson said she's to blame.
She caused all that stuff.
Because she caused it all. Because why? What was she doing?
Cheating.
She was
And
cheating. So Dawson has very astutely just illustrated the just world hypothesis. He ranked this woman. It was her fault that she got murdered because she was cheating on her husband. Okay? The just world hypothesis says people get what they deserve, and they deserve what they get. So we have a tendency to attribute, right, bad things to bad people. Now, we can think about this. This is a fun little story, okay? But we can think about this in real life, okay? There are a lot of women who are raped, and if they are dressed scantily clad, or if they are out late at night and drunk, we tend to say what? Well, they got what they deserved. Okay, what about welfare? Are these people on welfare because they are lazy and can't work? So you can see how this kind of goes into society and that sort of thing as well. The new one we have here is the halo effect. This is a new term from last year. I haven't seen a question on it, but I have seen it appear on multiple choice question answers. So it could possibly pop up as a main choice as well. The halo effect is basically whatever your first impression of a person is, it creates like this little halo. And you view the person like that. It's hard to get over that first impression. Okay, a halo of a good first impression leads you to think that person is a generally good person. We have a predisposition to admire all of the person because they're sort of glowing with this good first impression, whether or not they deserve it. All right, on your outline that I have uploaded, there's this whole next section that says articulate the social or the impact of social and cultural categories of self-concept in relation with others, gender, race, and ethnicity. So if you remember self-concept, we talked about it when we were talking about humanistic theory, that sort of thing. That is all of our thoughts and feelings about ourselves in answer to the question, who am I? So I'm going to be pretty general here, and you can just think about it on your own. But what culture we are in, what gender we are, what race we are, what ethnicity we are, colors how we think about ourselves. So if you are a female, okay, you're a female. You're going to view yourself differently. You're going to have a different self-concept based on that category of female than a male would. If you are a white person or an Indian person or an African American person, you are going to view yourself through the eyes of that race, for good or for bad. And if you are an individualistic culture, right, we already talked about how we're going to think more of ourselves than somebody who is growing up in a collectivist culture. They're going to think more of the group. All right, so again, that's sort of a, just sort of think about, don't need to worry about too much about questions or notes, but they did throw that in there, and it is something kind of just to ponder, like your ethnicity, your religion, your race, how has that colored who you think you are? All right, last thing on the first page, self-fulfilling prophecy. This one is a big one. They like this one, so put a big star or highlight it. Self-fulfilling prophecy is a belief that leads to its own fulfillment. It explains how our ideas of others influences those others' behaviors. Okay, so we can have expectations about a person, and that can actually influence the way that person behaves or performs. There was this famous study from Rosenthal and Jacobson. It was called Pygmalion in the Classroom. And what they did is they went to an elementary school, second graders, first graders, whatever. They gave the students what they told the teachers was going to be a test that was going to determine their sort of ability to grow that school year. Okay, so they said, we're going to give them this test, and these results are going to show which students are primed for growth this year, okay? So what they ended up doing was just giving them an IQ test. It wasn't a special test. It was a regular old IQ test. And then Jacobson and Rosenthal, they just picked a group of children from randomly. It wasn't any rhyme or reason. Picked these children randomly, and they said, all right, these children, teachers, these children are the children that our test has shown are primed for growth. They're going to do awesome this year. You should put all of your resources into them, like watch them, right? So the teachers, again, these students were just random, but the teachers having this sort of belief about these 10 students, okay, whatever they did throughout the year actually worked. So, let's see. At the end of the year, the researchers returned to take another measure of the students, and those 10 students, even though they were just randomly selected, their IQ scores actually increased higher than the other kids. So whether the teachers were doing it intentionally or unintentionally, their belief that these children were the ones that were primed for growth, they actually grew. In some way, the teacher's expectations came to fruition, and that is all self-fulfilling prophecy is. So if you came into my classroom and you heard I was a horrible teacher, and you heard I was so mean, I gave so much work, blah, 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 blah. Okay, you have this expectation. You come into my classroom and you're all going to treat me in a manner that lines up with what you've heard. Now, how might then that affect my behavior? Well, maybe you misbehave, and maybe then I do become mean, or maybe I am more strict than I normally would be. And so your expectations, right, influence my behavior. It could work the other way. What if I heard from all the teachers of your 9th grade year how awful you guys were and how unruly, right? So then somehow my belief in that would influence the way you behaved in the classroom. Okay, it's not a spoken, it's an internal belief, but that is what self-fulfilling prophecy is. If we have this idea of how a person is, that idea, that belief, that expectation can actually affect that person's behavior. All right, last little bit, and then you can be done with section 1. We're going to move on to Leon Festinger and cognitive dissonance. We have talked about cognitive dissonance before. Cognitive dissonance before, and we were going to talk about it again. All right, so what is an attitude? An attitude is feelings about something. Okay, what your attitude about something is that predispose us to respond in a particular way to an object or people or events. Okay, if we have a negative attitude about school, we're going to act negatively at school. If we have a negative attitude about doing online learning, then we're not going to do it. Okay. Leon Festinger, he did an experiment that we've talked about before with knobs. I have put a link on the website to a video of Leon Festinger in this little knob experiment. So if you would like to look at it, it's not very long, but it goes through the little experiment. It would be good for you to look at it. What he did, he came up with a really, really boring activity. He gave subjects 12 spools without thread. So, a little spool of thread. And he asked subjects to put the spools onto the tray, and then empty the tray, and then put the spools back onto the tray, and then off the tray, and then on one at a time for 30 minutes. Okay, then he took the spools away and put a board in front of the subjects that contained 48 pegs. The subjects were then asked to turn the peg a quarter of a turn, each peg a quarter of a turn, and then start over, each peg a quarter of a turn. And they had to do this for 30 minutes. Festinger wanted the subjects to have a really, really boring experience. When the subjects were finished, Festinger told the subjects that the experimenter's assistant had not shown up for the day, and they needed for them to go and get the next subject in the waiting room. They said, would you go to the next subject and tell them that the activity was really, really exciting, really, really interesting. Some of those subjects were given $1, and some of the subjects were given $20 to complete this little task. Now, the subjects that were paid $20 had no problem lying. They thought it was great, whatever, I got $20 in my pocket, especially when you think of it was back then, $20 was a lot of money. They said the activity was fine. The people that were paid $1, they also said to these subjects next in line that the activity was good and great for $1. Okay, so then after they did this little exercise, Festinger quizzed or talked to both of those subjects. The $20 people, they said it wasn't bad to lie. They had no uneasiness. But the $1 people, instead of saying it was hard to lie, they had actually changed their perception of the task. They said, no, it was fine. It really wasn't that bad. Okay, so why? So what happened there was an attitude change because of cognitive dissonance. So if you remember, cognitive dissonance, I told you, was this feeling. We don't like to feel inconsistent, right? We like to be consistent. Our attitudes should match our behavior. When that is happening, all is good. Okay, but when we do something that goes against our beliefs, we get this like feeling, and that feeling is cognitive dissonance. Now, the cognitive dissonance theory says when we get that feeling of inconsistency, we have to make that feeling go away. And we do that usually by changing our attitudes. Okay, because changing our attitudes is a whole lot easier than changing our actions. Okay, so we can talk about this with cheating, right? We talked about this before. So you grow up, right? All in school, you are not supposed to cheat. Cheating is wrong. You're not supposed to cheat at school. You're not supposed to cheat in life. You're not supposed to cheat at board games. And then you get to Stanton. And you have all this work, and you can't get it all done. And so you say, hey, friend, can I copy your homework and you can copy mine? And is that cheating?
Yes.
You're going to feel, right? I'm not supposed to do this, but you did it. So you're going to feel this icky feeling of cognitive dissonance. And then what are you going to do? You're not going to stop. You're going to change your belief about it. And you're going to say, oh, that's not really cheating. That's not on a test. That's not taking a picture of it with my phone that I'm hiding in my hoodie, right? That is just helping a friend out. That's cooperative learning. Okay, so what you do there to fix the cognitive dissonance is you change your attitude, the way you think about something. You justify, you rationalize, okay, because that's much easier than changing the behavior. All right, so that is the end of lesson 1. What I would like you to do next is to do the exit ticket for 5 points extra credit. If you do the exit ticket, I'll give you 5 points extra credit. You have to get 50% right. So make sure you look through your notes. Look through the Prezi first before you take it. I have opened it up from Monday at 8 a.m. to Friday at 4 p.m. So that is your time. I will not extend it. This is your time. I want you to do it during the week to get that done. Spend a little bit of time. Hopefully this was doable. And we'll do the same thing for lesson 2 and lesson 3. So if we are just out a week, we'll have gotten 3 lessons in. If we end up being out more time, I will keep doing this. So hopefully this helps. Please email me any questions or any comments, and I will try to post another video with that. Be nice in the comment section. And I hope everyone is doing well.
And cut.